Hey everyone, this is Helios. I wanted to take a moment to speak outside of the confines of the Sharpcast in order to address a story that's been going on for a while now and has not been brought up on the show or to my fellow co hosts. As you all know, before the show, we have a little crosstalk segment where we all get into the Discord call and kind of hang out and kind of discuss informally various issues that are on our minds that may not make it into that day's show, either because we don't have the time for them or because they're not going to be whatever subject that we're focusing on that particular day. Gonzo has recently started uploading these little crosstalk segments to our channel because they often prove to be just as insightful as the show itself, and they give everyone a better idea of where we stand on a variety of issues. I wanted to take this opportunity to speak not only outside of the show, but outside of the crosstalk, because this is going to essentially be a patented Helios monologue. And Sharp doesn't like it too much when I do that on the show, and I feel that because of the informal nature of the crosstalk, I wouldn't be able to say everything I have to say in the time we have allotted. This was also something that I was considering doing for some time now, where I could just kind of speak directly on various issues that happen to be important to me, or do a rapid react to anything that happens when we're not on the air. But that is not why I'm doing this. The reason I'm doing this is because there has been a story that has been going on for the last couple of weeks that has not been addressed on the show, and in fact, I haven't brought it up to my co-hosts. You see, the way that our show works is that we have a little group chat where we all just kind of hang out and discuss various political stories that come across our news feeds. But when it comes to the actual stories that make it into the chat, they are primarily posted by three people: myself, Scarlet Rose, and Gonzo. And 95% of what Gonzo posts are just stuff that I retweet onto my main Twitter feed because Gonzo is my most dedicated Twitter follower. This is not meant to be a knock on Sharp or Gonzo or Ren or our occasional guest Izzy. It's just the reality that we all have lives and we're all busy doing other things, and we're not all as hyper connected into the political world as I am. So there really isn't that much of an opportunity for everyone to be able to be as hyper aware as I might be when things are going down in politics. So with that in mind, this story that I'm about to address, I have made efforts to not retweet onto my main timeline, and I have not brought it up to my co-hosts. So that is on me. That's my responsibility. I wasn't trying to necessarily keep this story from them. I was mainly trying to see how it was going to play out and whether it was going to just be a flash in the pan and therefore not even worth addressing, or if it was going to become something big. And it's an awkward position because it's firmly in the middle. It's not something that people are really talking about, but it's not something that people are ignoring either. It's gotten coverage on a couple of my news feeds, namely like Politico and the Daily Beast, but it hasn't really gotten a lot of traction elsewhere. None of my co-hosts have brought this story up in our group chat, and in fact, of all of my politically inclined friends, only one of them has even mentioned this to me, which makes me believe that this story is not really as big or as widespread as some people may wish it to be, for better or worse. So, I am going to take this moment to kind of address this story, give you all a summary of what's been going on, as well as my thoughts on it. As regular viewers know, we here on the Sharpcast are supporters, not financially, but ethically, morally, spiritually, of the Lincoln Project. The Lincoln Project, if you've been living in a bubble this past year, is a SuperPAC composed of former Republican political operatives that was formed with the express purpose of defeating Donald Trump in the 2020 election. They succeeded in that goal and have since expanded their efforts to fighting against Trumpism, as in all of Trump's aiders and abettors and enablers, and advocating pro-democracy causes throughout the United States. Over the course of the past couple of months, there has been a story developing involving the Lincoln Project, and over these last couple of weeks, it has definitely gone from nothing to not necessarily a big thing, but definitely something. This past week, I have seen many members of the Lincoln Project resign from the group. open infighting between co-founding members, allegations of fraud and toxicity leveled at the Lincoln Project, and the future of the group itself is now very much in question. And all of this stems from allegations that are being made towards one of their co-founders, a Republican political operative named John Weaver. John Weaver is a Republican operative, as I mentioned, who has been around the block many, many times. This is a guy who got his start in the 80s. He has worked on various political campaigns, most notably John McCain's in 2008, John Huntsman's in 2012, and John Case's in 2016. And he also, for a time, worked for the Democratic Congressional Election Committee, the committee that's designed to elect Democrats in congressional seats. He was one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project in December of 2019. And in June of last year, he left the Lincoln Project due to a medical emergency, or at least that's what he's claimed. And he has not been physically or really in any way part of the group for over half of a year now. In December of 2020, there were rumors starting to float around that John Weaver had engaged in inappropriate, trying to find the best way to phrase this. In December 2020, rumors began to circulate that John Weaver had sexually harassed young men looking for jobs in the political consulting sphere. He had sent sexually explicit text messages to over 20 men, promising them jobs with various political organizations, including the Lincoln Project, allegedly, in exchange for sexual favors. These 20 men spoke to the New York Times. Actually, it's 21 men spoke to the New York Times. And the New York Times ran a story about it back in January of this year. John Weaver, who I follow on Twitter and has actually locked his account. He actually hasn't been active since the election. John Weaver released a statement to Axios stating that these allegations were true in the sense that he did send inappropriate text messages to these men. He believed that they were consensual at the time, and I do believe that the victims have acknowledged that these were consensual, albeit very inappropriate and arguably predatory relationships. And John Weaver also disclosed that he was a gay man and that he also has a wife who he loves and kids, and it's been very difficult for him to reconcile this. And we haven't heard from John Weaver since. Initially, the Lincoln Project was non-committal, releasing just a statement saying that whatever John said, it spoke for itself. Then it came out that one of the victims began having contact with John Weaver when they were 14 years old. Now, the messages themselves did not become sexually explicit until after the victim had turned 18. But the fact remains that this person was in contact with John Weaver when they were 14 years old. Also, it should be noted that Laura Ingraham's show claims that there is another minor who did, in fact, receive sexually explicit messages from John Weaver, but it's Laura Ingraham, it's Fox, so, who the fuck knows what the veracity of that claim is. When that claim initially came out, that John Weaver had contact with a 14-year-old boy, the Lincoln Project released a statement that vociferously and categorically condemned John Weaver in some of the harshest terms I've ever seen from a statement released by a SuperPAC or any other organization. It also claimed that the Lincoln Project was not aware of these allegations, and had they been made aware, they would not have ever considered working with John Weaver in any capacity. And so initially that was going to be the end of the story. A couple weeks ago, Lincoln Project co-founder Jennifer Horn abruptly resigned from the group. And she claimed in a statement to the Daily Beast that the reason she resigned was because of the allegations against John Weaver. The Lincoln Project then published a statement claiming that the reason for Jennifer Horn's resignation was in fact due to a contract dispute, and accused her of not necessarily trying to extort the Lincoln Project for money, but trying to secure her own financial position at a time when the group was under great duress. Jennifer Horn disputed these claims. And then she began conversing with a reporter from 19th News who began working on a story about the work culture of the Lincoln Project, which was described as a toxic work culture, one where there was disparity between how men and women were treated, and that Jennifer Horn herself was often excluded and belittled from, she was excluded from meetings and belittled by members of the senior staff. The Lincoln Project posted a series of direct messages between Jennifer Horn and this reporter onto their Twitter page. I have not read these direct messages. I just know that they exist. And I know that the backlash against them was very, very negative, with people who were associated with the Lincoln Project, most notably George Conway, who is the wife of Kellyanne Conway, saying that they should be taken down because they could potentially be a violation of federal law. The Lincoln Project did take down those text messages, and they released a later statement saying that the report being compiled by 19th News was not accurate and was a smear job. Over the past couple days, we have seen, as I mentioned in the beginning, multiple members of the Lincoln Project resigning, ranging from senior advisors to people that were co-founders, much more senior management staff. And there has been a lot of differing reactions from these individuals regarding the current state of the Lincoln Project as well as the group's future. Some have called for the Lincoln Project to clean up its act and stay the course, while others have called for the group to be shut down. And while the number of people who want the Lincoln Project to die, there is considerable overlap between people who either A, hated the Lincoln Project to begin with, so people like Don Jr., who suddenly is playing this moralist, which is just fucking hilarious to me, or people who never wanted to believe that the Lincoln Project played any sort of role in Trump's defeat. So as a result of all this, there's now these accusations going around that the Lincoln Project is really nothing more than a massive scam, that it's a grift, and that it's just there to enrich its senior membership staff at the expense of its donators, and wasn't really that effective to begin with. I can tell you that the final statement there, that it was never effective in bringing down Trump, is an outright. It's false, bordering on a lie. It's a provable fallacy that borders on an outright lie. And I'll get into that later. Over the last few days, statements have been released by those involved in the Lincoln Project, and I'm going to read 3 of them to you now in their entirety. The statements come from the Lincoln Project itself. I believe it was written by Reed Galen. And 2 statements, one from Steve Schmidt and one from Jennifer Horn. They are both co-founders of the Lincoln Project who are no longer with the organization. These statements paint a picture of what was going on inside the Lincoln Project and what led to things getting the way they are now. They don't necessarily contradict each other, but some of them are incredibly specific about some things while incredibly vague about others. They also don't give any indication as to the future of this group. But the main reason I'm going to read them out to you is to provide you full context of where things are as of today, February 17, 2021. And so the comments that I make afterward will make a lot more sense. So first, we're going to start with the Lincoln Project statement. This was issued at 7:22 p.m. on February 15th. Quote, "The Lincoln Project has retained the law firm of Paul Hastings to investigate allegations of inappropriate behavior by John Weaver as part of a comprehensive review of our operations and culture. The review process is currently underway. We are committed to creating a positive, diverse, and inclusive workplace environment at the Lincoln Project, and inappropriate behavior by anyone associated with the organization will not be tolerated under any circumstances. We have already taken decisive action to address internal concerns. Additionally, we are releasing staff and former staff from the confidentiality provisions in their employment agreements to discuss their workplace environment. Based on the findings of this review, we will take all necessary action to correct any issues of deficiencies that are identified. Concurrently, we are also working with outside counsel and professional consultants to strengthen our corporate governance, finance, and operational structure, human resources, and leadership to position the Lincoln Project to further maximize our impact and lean into our important mission advancing democracy. The Lincoln Project was founded to combat political forces who seek to undermine our democracy. We revolutionized how political action committees operate and spent $81 million last cycle to create and place more than 300 advertisements, host national town halls, conduct voter outreach, and launch a podcast and streaming video network that engaged millions of voters. 80% of our funds went to voter content production. Our historic results speak for themselves. Moving forward, we have important work ahead of us, and we have created a nationwide movement of Americans who support our objectives. In order to continue fulfilling our promise to our millions of supporters and contributors, we must address any and all internal organizational issues immediately and put in place a governance and diverse leadership structure that reflects our core values and ensures we will continue to attract the best talent available. The Lincoln Project will continue producing and distributing our popular content and commentary while these reviews are being conducted, and we are operating at full capacity. End quote. This next statement comes from former Lincoln Project co-founder Steve Schmidt, and this was published on February 12, 2021 at 7:03 p.m. Quote, "It was just a touch, a light one, and it lasted for only a moment. I was a 13-year-old boy at the Rock Hill Boy Scout camp. His name was Ray, and he was the camp medic. The older scouts called him Gay Ray and taunted and teased us about our inevitable encounter with him when the itch of the mosquito bites became too much to bear. It happened almost precisely like the older kids said it would. Covered in bites, I went to the medical cabin. He told me to take my clothes off. I complied. He looked at my body and examined the bites just like he said he would. He began applying an ointment just like they said he would. I remember being paralyzed as his hands moved up my body and brushed over my penis. I remember all of this with perfect clarity up to the moment I was touched. The next part is fuzzier. I just know that I left. Then I came back to camp, and I must have had a look on my face because I remember the laughing. The look on my face must have looked familiar to the other boys because it was the same one they must have had when they returned from Ray's exam. Camp continued, and I made sure never to return to the medical cabin. When I got home, I told my parents. The adults huddled, and the collective decision they made was to deal with it internally. He wasn't turned into the police because the consensus of the adults was that dealing with law enforcement would be traumatic for all the boys involved. In the end, we were told that Ray wouldn't return. I don't know what happened to him, and even when the day came that I had the power, money, and ability to find out and do something to him or about him, I chose not to. Something else happened in the cabin that day. The extroverted little boy who walked in died. An introverted boy with deep trust issues walked out. Before that day, I have no memory of ever feeling anger. After that day, and despite the passage of so many years, the anger has never left. It's always there, below the surface. It has risen up many times over the years. Later in life, that anger would immolate my faith in the Catholic Church. My faith had been diminished to a flicker of flame by the time I served in the White House. I remember feeling like something that had anchored me was stolen. I felt lost in a strange way. Though at the time, I would never have described myself as particularly religious. I reached out to see if I could get an audience with the man who had presided over my confirmation at St. Luke's Church on North Plainfield, New Jersey. By this point, he was a Monsignor and the acting auxiliary bishop of the Metuchen Diocese. Apologies for the pronunciation. When I met with him in Washington, he was His Eminence Theodore Cardinal McCarrick. Learning that the man I trusted to share my soul and the deepest memories of my violation was among the most prolific of the Catholic Church's sex criminals permanently shattered my faith and left me estranged from God. It has taken nearly 16 years since that betrayal to find faith again, which I have during the process of my conversion to Judaism. A touch on the table at age 13 that lasted seconds has been a defining event in my life. It never went away. That moment bequeathed me the three companions of my life that are always close and often present: anger, shame, and depression. Depression has always been the companion I feared the most, and it is something I was too ashamed to admit I was struggling with. I found the help in a most unlikely place. Curtis Hoek is a writer for Newsbusters. He attacks me and the Lincoln Project with fervor and glee, and yet one day he wrote bravely about his struggles with depression. When I read it, I felt like it was meant for me, and I reached out to him to thank him. He saved my life and liberated me from a fear of seeking help. I will always be grateful for his courage. I am talking about my struggle in an open way for the first time because maybe it will be the case that I can help just one person understand what I couldn't until I was almost 50 years old. It wasn't my fault. I met a man for the first time in my life in late 2006. His name was John Weaver. I met him at a fundraiser for Arnold Schwarzenegger where John McCain was the headliner at the end of the 2006 campaign. I arrived at that event with Arnold and I left with McCain. Within months, under Weaver's leadership, the campaign had collapsed and was bankrupt. During all the time I worked for John McCain, I never heard a single person ever whisper that John Weaver was a predator. I did not have a professional relationship with John Weaver again until December 2019. I have said on the record that I learned about John Weaver's misconduct with an underage boy this past January. I know this is true, and I have certainty that the Lincoln Project independent investigation into John Weaver's conduct will validate this. My purpose in writing this isn't to express what and when I knew about John Weaver, but how I feel about him, what he did, and how many people he hurt. This is my truth. John Weaver has put me back into that faraway cabin with Ray. I am incandescently angry about it. I am angry because I know the damage that he caused to me, and I know the journey that lies ahead for every young man that trusted, feared, and was abused by John Weaver. I know the shame, the guilt, the doubt, the depression, and anger that lies ahead. I know John Weaver will be a lifelong companion for them in the way that Ray has been for me. I detest John Weaver in a way I can't articulate. My heart breaks for the young men felt unseen and unheard in an organization that I started. I am ashamed of it. I promise that we will release the full findings of what we discover through an independent investigation. There is another truth about John Weaver of which I must speak. Like all predators, he is a skilled liar, and like all predators, he left clues. I had the surreal experience in the last month of being grilled by a national newspaper about my knowledge of John Weaver's misconduct. When I got off that call, I talked to another reporter from the same newspaper who said the newspaper has known for years. Since John Weaver's misconduct was made public, I learned about another national reporter that was going to write about Weaver, but then was ultimately dissuaded to do so by Weaver because he had told the reporter that his cancer had returned and he had just 6 months to live. I was asked by a reporter if I thought the heart attack he told us about was real. The truth is, I don't know. I responded by saying I don't know if he lives in Texas. I just know that he is a liar and a predator, and I wish our paths never crossed. Unfortunately, they did. I wish John Weaver was not a co-founder of the Lincoln Project, but as hard as I wish for that to be, I cannot change that he was. I am enormously proud of the Lincoln Project and what we have accomplished to date. I believe we built the most successfully and politically lethal SuperPAC in history. We built a movement with millions of people, and we played a decisive role in Donald Trump's defeat. During these last weeks, I have been consumed by anger and rage, as I have seen the attacks from the rancid collection of liars, thugs, and fascists, including Donald Trump Jr. and Laura Ingraham, attack the Lincoln Project, my character, and the character of my friends over John Weaver's immoral predations. I am in a tough business, and I know what I signed up for. I am long past the moments of fear that gripped me when FBI agents showed up at my house to tell me I was on the hit list of the Trump bomber. The truth is that these attacks awaken all of my old companions at once. Shame, anger, and depression. For those around me, it is the anger that has been the most visible. For those who love me, it has been the depression. Either way, it has not brought out my best self. I am not the daily manager of the Lincoln Project, but I am the senior leader. As the senior leader, it is my responsibility to set an example and to assume accountability. I would like to apologize to Jennifer Horn. I let my anger turn a business dispute into a public war that has distracted from the fight against American fascism. Jennifer was an important and valuable member of our team. Truth be told, I didn't interact with Jennifer very often, but I always enjoyed the occasions when we did. She deserved better from me. She deserved a leader who could restrain his anger. I am sorry for my failure. Yesterday, I was shown correspondence between Jennifer Horn and Amanda Becker, a reporter at the 19th News. I was told it came from an anonymous source. That direct message should never have been made public. It is my job as the senior leader to accept responsibility for the tremendous misjudgment, to release it. I apologize on behalf of the organization to both Jennifer Horn and Amanda Becker. I woke up this morning and realized I've been fighting for a long time. It's taken a toll. I'm tired. Presently, the Lincoln Project board is made up of 4 middle-aged white men. That composition does not reflect our nation nor our movement. I am resigning my seat on the Lincoln Project board to make room for the appointment of a female board member as the first step to reform and professionalize the Lincoln Project. The Lincoln Project was built to fight. It is my deepest hope that despite the recent internal events that have distracted from our cause, you will entrust in us to continue to fight for what the entire Lincoln Project movement believes in: combating the rising tide of fascism and authoritarianism in this country. We are one election away from seeing the end of American democracy. This fight will go on for the rest of my life. For me, it's time to step back from the front, to get healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually. I look forward to being on Real Time with Bill Maher tonight on HBO and then taking some much-needed time off. Stay strong. There's much work to be done. Steve. I'd like to point out for the record that Steve Schmidt did appear that night on Real Time with Bill Maher. He was asked questions about the financial statements of the Lincoln Project. He was not asked questions about John Weaver. Finally, I'd like to read the statement made by Jennifer Horn, which was released to the Daily Beast and the New York Times. When I first read in the New York Times that the Lincoln Project co-founder, John Weaver, had targeted at least 21 young men with sexual advances and used his position of influence to try and seduce them, I was horrified. The accounts included one from a young man who claims he was first approached by Weaver when he was just 14 years old. I originally joined the Lincoln Project from a position of principle. Trump was a dangerous, authoritarian figure who posed an existential threat to the Republic. Defeating him would require denouncing my party and cost me long-cherished friendships. The Lincoln Project approached this fight aggressively, and we, along with a coalition of other like-minded groups and millions of Americans, were ultimately successful in moving enough Republican voters to contribute the victory for Joe Biden. But when the New York Times report on Weaver came out recently, I started getting phone calls from some victims who shared very disturbing stories about their interactions with him. Interactions that apparently started nearly a year ago, and according to these young men, were communicated to others in the Lincoln Project. I was not aware of these communications or the allegations contained within them. I was genuinely shocked. These are not my stories to tell, but I knew in that moment that the Lincoln Project had an opportunity to take a stand and do better. At the time, I happened to be in the process of negotiating a post-2020 contract with the Lincoln Project. As the only woman and the only high-ranking Republican Party official among the original founders and the organization, I gave my heart and soul to the effort to defeat Donald Trump and defend democracy. Despite my co-founder status, I was never part of or included in the Lincoln Project's inner circle, which maintained tight operational control of the organization. And based on public reports, I clearly was not compensated anywhere near as lavishly as others seemingly were, earning a small fraction of what some of my male counterparts did. Most important to me was the work I had done to defeat Trump, and I wanted to continue it. But after I heard from these victims, I added one non-negotiable demand to my counteroffer, and here is why. Anytime there is an imbalance of power in a relationship, the weaker person becomes vulnerable to abuse. The stronger, more influential person has an obligation to conduct themselves with honor and integrity in order to preserve the dignity and autonomy of all involved. Political organizations are largely staffed by enthusiastic, dedicated young people who want to be part of something greater than themselves and who are excited by the opportunity to work with candidates or powerful political professionals. Politics is a world built on loyalty to a candidate, a party, or powerful boss. Political organizations are a particularly vulnerable environment as young staffers are too often taken advantage of by their superiors, and there is rarely a human resources department to which to report their concerns. In the wake of the Weaver story, the Lincoln Project had an opportunity to confront this reality, address the pressing issue, and take a leadership role in challenging the circumstances that have happened in politics 1,000 times over. Instead, when the Weaver news broke, the organization released a statement without my knowledge or input. When I spoke to one of the founders to raise my objections and concerns, I was yelled at, demeaned, and lied to. Because we were in the process of contract negotiations, I included in my counteroffer as the number one condition that we properly address the Weaver issue publicly and issue a call to action to take on sexual harassment and power imbalance or exploitation issues. I made it clear that I could not continue my association with the project otherwise. My suggestions were rejected outright, and on February 5th, I terminated my relationship with the Lincoln Project. The organization's response to my departure was angry, questioning my values and suggesting my departure was financially motivated. To be very clear, this is patently false and a direct assault on my character, but they will neither intimidate nor silence me. I know these attacks will continue as I speak up. If the response was intended to cause others to question my credibility and distract from the problem at hand, then it failed. That problem is too important to ignore. That too many young people are finding themselves victims of powerful sexual predators in the world of politics, and no one is doing anything about it. These young people who reached out to me are victims, not tattletales. They deserve the respect of being believed and the security of being able to tell their stories without worry about losing their jobs. Or the men called me after the New York Times story ran. They spoke of feeling ignored, hurt that their experiences were being denied, angered that they had been used and lied to, and fearful that they would be targeted again. It was heartbreaking to hear. I respect their privacy and hope they will one day feel safe sharing their stories, empowered rather than fearful. I hope they can read this and know that they have been heard. But most importantly, I hope we can now address the issue honestly and openly and repair what is broken and protect others from being victimized by this abuse in the future. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. I want to start off by saying a couple things. First of all, as I said before, I really respected the Lincoln Project. I admired the job that they did in the 2020 election. I admire that these were people who were willing to put country over party and go after Donald Trump. I admired that these people were also very, very passionate about their cause. They didn't try to code their language in some kind of corporate speak. The ads they put out there were some of the most brutal political ads in history, and everything about them was true. This was an organization that, before this, what we were told and what the facts showed, did everything the right way, and they certainly got results. So, when I say what I'm going to say here, understand that it comes from a place of respect for this organization and wanting to see them do better. Number 2, one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project is a man by the name of Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson is someone that we here on this program are a fan of, even Scarlet Rose, albeit begrudgingly. He is a former Republican political strategist, author of the New York Times bestsellers Everything Trump Touches Dies and Running Against the Devil, and he is a frequent contributor on MSNBC and occasionally appears on CNN. He is also an editor-at-large at the Daily Beast and a contributor there. He hosts a podcast on the Daily Beast called The New Abnormal with Molly Jong-Fast, who is also an editor and contributor and was also an unpaid advisor for the Lincoln Project. She has since resigned her position. On the latest episode of The New Abnormal at the time of this recording, which premiered on February 16th, Molly Jong-Fast had this to say.
I want to keep this brief. There have been a series of scandals swirling around the Lincoln Project. The most serious involve accusations that a Lincoln Project co-founder harassed young men, including one person who went on to be a Lincoln Project contractor, and separately, one person who was a minor at the time. Reporters from the Daily Beast and others have not uncovered any direct evidence so far that our podcast host Rick Wilson was aware of such actions. I want to say that Jesse and I both love Rick as a friend and podcast host and have only had good experiences working with him. I personally was an unpaid advisor for the Lincoln Project and have since resigned from that position. As of tonight, the Lincoln Project has released everyone from their NDAs, which should help get to the bottom of this. That said, there have been so many controversies around the Lincoln Project, we mutually agreed with Rick to pause his podcast appearances until at least the internal investigation is resolved.
I do not expect Rick to be off the show forever, but I also don't expect him to be back anytime soon. I also want to reiterate what Molly said in her statement. As of now, there has been nothing that directly links Rick Wilson to these allegations being made against the Lincoln Project. Whenever I have read stories about what's going on, anytime Rick has been name dropped, it's only been in association with the other co-founders. He has not been directly mentioned when it comes to anything inappropriate or possibly illegal. In fact, the only thing I could find regarding him and monetary transactions is that, according to a Fox News report, which, again, it's Fox, he apparently raised $64,000 for a film adaptation of Everything Trump Touches Dies. This is the first I've ever heard of this, so I can't really tell you any more about it, except that if this is true, I would very much like to see this film released because I think it would be a good movie. But other than that, there is nothing that directly links Rick to what is being alleged here besides his association with the Lincoln Project as a co-founder. Rick himself has been radio silent about this matter. He has not released any statements about it as far as I know, and the only activity on his Twitter account since the last statement from the Lincoln Project has been retweets of the Lincoln Project and other various Twitter accounts. Number 3, I want to kind of walk you guys through what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, okay? And I'm not going to apologize for it, so if you don't like it, too bad. I'm not going to try to litigate the legal responsibility of the Lincoln Project when it comes to John Weaver, which is really what I intend to focus on here. The organizational culture of the Lincoln Project and the financial aspect of the whole thing, I couldn't really care less about. All I'll tell you is that this, in my opinion, was not some kind of blatant cash grab. In my opinion, it would have been a lot more obvious if that was the case. I do believe that Rick Wilson, Reed Galen, Steve Schmidt, Jennifer Horn, Ron Steslow, and the other founding members of the Lincoln Project, as well as all of the various interns and ad people and consultants and contractors put their heart and soul into this project, and they certainly got results. As I mentioned, they were looking to peel off just 4% of the Republican electorate to defeat Donald Trump, and they managed to get somewhere between 8 and 12%. So not only did they do their job, they did their job a hell of a lot better than anyone expected. Their ads were also seen by Trump himself, and this led directly to the firing of Brad Parscale and various other campaign shakeups, and also may have insinuated that Mike Pence could do something to stop the certification of election results, which ultimately led to the insurrection on January 6th. So maybe when Rudy Giuliani is insinuating that the Lincoln Project is responsible for the insurrection, yeah, he's still talking out of his ass. He's fucking crazy. So this is actually one of the reasons, though, I didn't want to talk about this, because I don't really care about the workplace culture or the financial aspects. Like, if you need to see more clarity on what their finances are before you donate again, that's totally fine. Their workplace culture doesn't sound great, but I don't work for them. I don't really plan on working for them. I'd like to work for them, but I don't think it's in the cards. So that's on them to handle and certainly clean up. What I'm most interested in is the relationship with John Weaver. Now, if you've made up your mind that these guys are a bunch of scam artists, or if they covered for a sexual abuser, or if they're all in on sexual abuse themselves, that's your business, okay? That's your opinion. That's fine. That's your business. I'm not going down that road, okay? I do not see a reason to accuse anyone in the Lincoln Project of doing anything. And I want to emphasize this, by the way. John Weaver has not been formally accused of a crime. I want to point this out. John Weaver, as of today, February 17, 2021, has not been formally accused of a crime. I can tell you that apparently the FBI is investigating him. I don't know if he's currently the target of investigation or a past target of investigation, but as of right now, he has not been accused of committing a crime. And again, the people who are accusing him of sexual harassment, they said that the relationships were consensual, but very, very inappropriate, and in this light, certainly predatory. So, if you want me to blast John Weaver, I'm happy to do that. But I am right now, do not feel I'm in a place to lobby criminal charges against the Lincoln Project when I have no proof of them. I have no police reports. I have no physical evidence. I don't have anything. Now, again, they've promised a full-on investigation into this, and from my understanding, the law firm they've hired is a law firm that is a very straight shooter. These are not the kind of people that will tell you something to make you feel better. If they see something wrong, they will tell it to your face. So I'm going to be very interested in seeing the results of that investigation. But until then, we simply don't know what happened. And I'm not going to try to find out what happened because I can't. So I'm not going to get involved on some Twitter spat with, woke Twitter or whatever, and constantly get involved in these threads and retweets and whatever, where people just want to impugn the character of those who are currently with the Lincoln Project, or who were formerly with the Lincoln Project. And that's just kind of where we're at right now in 2021. So, if you want to try to lecture me and make accusations and make some stupid conclusions that all these people should be thrown in jail, take it somewhere else. I'm not interested. Now, if you want to have a discussion about the relevance of the story, if you want to have a discussion about your emotions, about what's going on, any questions you may have, I'm fine with that. Because you know what? This is a news story. I don't think we can just be dismissive about it and say it's not a news story because, CNN and MSNBC aren't running it. And again, as I mentioned, none of my co-hosts have brought this up. Only one of my politically oriented friends have brought this up. I know about it because, of course, I follow the Lincoln Project. I follow their senior members. They're both current and former. And I'm also very hyper-connected in the political world, so that's how I'm aware of this stuff. So I can't say it's not a news story just because I'm the only one aware of it. Because it is a news story, because they're public figures. So, again, I don't care right now about the organizational culture. I don't care about the finances. What I'm interested in, what I really care about is John Weaver. I want to know who knew what and when. In that regard, the Lincoln Project looks stupid. They really, really do. And I do think they failed everyone when it comes to John Weaver. Now, I'm not going to say they look bad, all right? Because if I say they look bad, it means there's an underlying deceit. there is some active conspiracy, there's some active cover-up that I can't prove right now. Look, they look stupid. Steve Schmidt, Rick Wilson, who, while he hasn't addressed these latest allegations, did address the John Weaver allegations on both the New Abnormal and on the Lincoln Project's the weekly television show, The Breakdown. I want to emphasize that even though the Lincoln Project says they're still operating at full capacity, they have not put out new episodes of their podcast. They have not released their newsletter. Their episode of The Breakdown, which is normally scheduled for Tuesday, did not air tonight, although apparently their Wednesday show, We're Speaking, is scheduled to go forward as planned, and they did in fact release a new ad today that targeted the Republican senators who voted to acquit Donald Trump in the face of overwhelming evidence that he is directly responsible for inciting the insurrection on January 6th. So they are operating at some capacity, but I do believe that certain things are on hold right now and may not be coming back for some time. So, when they tell me that they were not aware about John Weaver's transgressions until a month ago, I can accept that with the caveat that it's not a very credible story. Because as I mentioned, initially, their statement on the matter was non-committal. It was just, hey, John Weaver put out a statement, it speaks for itself. So you go from that to this man betrayed us all, and he's a predator and a liar. It doesn't look good. So, now, the allegations now say, of course, that these guys did in fact know about this earlier. Jennifer Horn said in her statement that these were communicated to the Lincoln Project. On some accounts, they knew as early as last March, which is about 2 months before John Weaver left the organization. And I want to stress this again. John Weaver has not physically or operationally been a part of the Lincoln Project since last June when he took a medical leave from the organization. He was still on medical leave when these allegations dropped, at which point the Lincoln Project promptly severed all ties with him. So, it's not like, he was in the office and hanging around them and doing day-to-day operations and they suddenly cut him loose. He hasn't been with them for months. In fact, when they went out to Utah in the final months of the campaign, John Weaver was not there. So I just want to emphasize that. But again, apparently this was brought up much sooner than January, and Rick did allude to this in his statement on the New Abnormal when he said at one point John Weaver was asked about this and he denied it. So what I can say from that, what I can say from the fact that you're claiming that you didn't know about this until January, but you also claim that when these rumors started floating around last year, and granted these rumors being reported by outlets like the New York Post or Breitbart, which we all know are incredibly reputable and unbiased, news organizations. When that happened, you asked John Weaver about it. And he told you no. So what this looks like to me, and again, this is based on just the information I have available to me, is that you did not perform a thorough investigation. All right? And, look, you're a SuperPAC. This guy was your co-founder. You hired this guy as a co-founder. How the hell do you come out and tell me that even though apparently a lot of people in the media knew about this, and according to Rick Wilson, this was actually an open secret on quote-unquote gay Twitter. How the hell is that true and you guys don't know about this until a month ago? What? You mean to tell me the guy could have been like a fucking serial killer and you wouldn't have known? I'm sorry, that doesn't work, okay? You're not hiring a guy to be a coffee boy. You're hiring a guy to be your co-founder. You're hiring a guy to help run your SuperPAC. It's not acceptable, okay? And this is where people like Jennifer Horn and George Conway and Tom Nichols have a very valid point. Because it looks like, at the very least, the Lincoln Project did not perform a thorough investigation. They might not have even performed a half-assed one. They talked to the person, they wanted to work for them, heard what they wanted to hear, and they may have willfully ignored, at the very least, any evidence that directly contradicted their conclusions. I mean, that is a remarkable failure that hurts everyone involved. And as Jennifer mentioned in her statement, this is a very unfortunate reality check for people out there who are hoping that someone, anyone, will actually take sexual abuse seriously. Jennifer was hoping the Lincoln Project would do that, but instead they initially did the bare minimum to avoid negative PR until they no longer could avoid it. I mean, I really can't imagine how those victims feel, seeing that the Lincoln Project took Weaver's statement at the time at face value and made no effort to get the full story until now. Not to mention, it does no favors for John Weaver either. Now, I'm not trying to make him out to be a sympathetic figure here. I mean, his alleged transgressions don't leave a whole lot of room for sympathy. But as I mentioned, he has not been accused of a crime. If he's accused of a crime, much different story. But if he isn't, then honestly, part of me does believe that he should be able to move forward with his life, ideally with the support of some kind of organization that can be there to help him learn from his past and become a better person. And the Lincoln Project's lack of action back then cast all this into serious doubt. Now, with that in mind, I mentioned that John Weaver was not just some random guy. He is a political operative who's been around for a while. He worked on John Kasa's campaign, on John Huntsman's campaign, on John McCain's campaign, and he was part, for a while, on the Democratic Committee to elect congressional candidates. So if we're going to ask the question, why didn't the Lincoln Project know? Why didn't John Kasich know? Why didn't John Huntsman know? Why didn't the Democratic Congressional Committee know? Why didn't the McCain campaign know? And if they did know, what did they know and when did they know it? These are all questions that need answering. And that's why this is a relevant story. Okay? I'm not going to just act like this shouldn't be brought up. I don't plan on talking about it for a whole show. I mean, I can't really add anything to try to make this all salacious or make it sensational. I don't really want to. I've given you all my thoughts. All right? I mean, you know, when Rick talked about us on the New Abnormal, he said that in politics there are bad people who do good things, good people who do bad things, and bad people who do bad things. John Weaver's a bad person that did a bad thing. Lincoln Project are good people that did a bad thing. And if you want to say else otherwise about the Lincoln Project, then the burden of proof is on you. Okay, the burden of proof is on the people who want to impugn their character. You need to show me other proof or something that leads me to believe that the Lincoln Project is criminally responsible for something. But again, the actual optics of how it looks, I mean, those are things that we can talk about, and I'm more than willing to. You know? So, but again, these allegations, I don't think they're necessarily a reason to smear these people, and especially because the Lincoln Project, to their credit, has shown a willingness to take responsibility for these actions. Now, of course, they're not outright going to come out and say that, yeah, we knew that John Weaver was sexting our interns around. You know, I mean, they're not going to say that. If the investigation shows that they knew, then obviously that's a different story. Okay? And I'll tell you all this right now. Again, I'm a big supporter of the Lincoln Project. I've been with these guys at the beginning. Never financially, because I don't really donate money to political campaigns, because that's just not who I am. But again, ethically, spiritually, morally, I mean, I don't think of everyone on our program, all of me and all of my politically minded friends, I don't think there's anyone who's been retweeting the Lincoln Project more than me. And I was one of the first followers of Twitter accounts. I've been with these guys at the beginning. I'm still with these guys now. All right? Because these allegations, they are obviously very disturbing. They're very alarming. They're incredibly troubling. But right now, my only stance is that there are reason to attack John Weaver, to condemn him, to denounce him. It's not a reason to smear everyone else in the Lincoln Project. It's not a reason to try and cancel them. It's just not. And if you're going to come to those conclusions, that's on you. All right? I'm not going to go on a witch hunt. I'm not going to intimate guilt. I'm not going to do any of that. I read the statements by the Lincoln Project and I stand by them. And I appreciate both Steve Schmidt and Jennifer Horn for putting their statements out. And I stand by them as well. They didn't have to do that, but they went out there authoritatively, and that makes me believe them. Now, if you want to call me a fool, go ahead. You want to tell me that I shouldn't believe the Lincoln Project, I shouldn't believe Steve Schmidt, I shouldn't believe Jennifer Horn, give me a reason why. Okay? And I want to say this about Jennifer Horn, okay? I don't appreciate the people, because I've seen the comments on Twitter, I don't appreciate the people that are just accusing her of wanting a quick buck, that are accusing her of trying to throw her colleagues under the bus for the sake of her own gain, all right? Because when you go out there and you say that anyone that sees something inappropriate going on, or is in a toxic workplace, or has experienced something like sexual harassment should speak up, and then when they do speak up and you accuse them of being attention seekers or just trying to cause trouble, you know what? You're part of the problem. You are. You can't say, if you see something, say something, and then turn around and accuse those same people of just trying to cause trouble when they say something. You can't have it both ways. So if you're really serious about combating sexual harassment in the workplace, if you're really serious about fostering an inclusive workplace environment, and most importantly, if you're serious about holding people accountable and speaking truth to power, you're going to listen to people like Jennifer Horn, and you're going to hear what she has to say. You can critique it, you can disagree with it, but I don't think you can dismiss it out of hand. Because look, the other thing that bugs me about this whole situation is the fact that they released the DMs. And that was very much the incorrect move. That should not have happened. I am incredibly disappointed the Lincoln Project did that. Hell, I'm disappointed they made it public in the first place, because that was an internal matter that should not have been brought to the public. And if you want to blame Jennifer Horn or Steve Schmidt for being the primary evidence for that, go ahead. Steve Schmidt, to his credit, has taken responsibility. Jennifer Horn has not, but I don't really think there's any blame for her to make, other than that she probably could have picked a better time to discuss the contract. And here's another thing I want to bring up really quickly. If what John Weaver was doing was common knowledge among this reporter that Steve Schmidt talked to, why did they wait until now to break the story? You know? If this really was a story that needed to get out in order to stop a sexual predator, why wait until after the 2020 election? And understand, I didn't hear Fox News even bring up this story. Whenever the Fox News mentioned the Lincoln Project, it was always basically Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham having a hate boner for Rick Wilson. At no point did they ever bring up John Weaver, at least to my knowledge. So the timing of the story is very, very strange, in the sense that this has been going on for months, but only now are you reporting it, which also happens to be right in the dead period between the end of the 2020 campaign and the realistic start of the 2022 campaign. I mean, I don't know how that looks. You guys can read into that however you want. But back to the DMs. It was the wrong decision. It has been excoriated as being the wrong decision. Steve Schmidt has acknowledged that it was the wrong decision. All I can say to that is, you know what? I've been there. I think we've all been there. I'm not saying that we've all gone out and leaked people's direct messages to the internet, although some of us certainly have. I haven't. I don't think any of my friends have either, but I know those who have. What I'm trying to say is that I think we've all been in the place where the part of your brain that says, you know, maybe we should think about this gets overwhelmed by a need to have some kind of response. I understand that a lot of people come at this from the perspective of Jennifer Horn, from someone who's experienced this retaliation or knows someone who has. And their stories are valid. Of course they are. I come at it from the other end, okay? I'm a relatively normal guy with a nice life. God willing, the creek don't rise. It stays that way. God willing, I'm not going to have someone leak my DMs because they're trying to smear me or tear me down. Hopefully it never happens. You know, we've talked on this show about cancel culture, and I got a feeling we're doing a lot more of it now since the Republicans are trying to make that a central issue since they don't really have a platform otherwise. The reason I detest cancel culture is this, okay? I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in consequence culture. What I mean by that is that if someone screws up and they make no effort to fix their mistake or even acknowledge it, and they continue engaging in that behavior, burn them to the ground. Light the match, burn them to the ground. Or at the very least, just tell them to piss off. On the other hand, if someone makes a mistake, recognizes they made a mistake, takes responsibility for it, and vows to do better, give them a chance. Let them have that chance. I mean, America is the land of second chances, for fuck's sake. And if you don't want to, fine. But at least have the decency to not puff yourself up about how roundly you condemn such behavior. I personally don't see a whole lot of difference between people with the gall to blame Jennifer Horn for speaking out against something that she felt was inappropriate and all those people who are loudly proclaiming the Lincoln Project to be a miserable waste of atoms and that anyone involved is a scam artist or a fraud. It gets on my nerves because it's a quick leap from just pointless moralizing to dismissing someone forever as that one thing in that one moment. And that's what quite a few people want to do to the Lincoln Project right now. And like I said, the majority of the people that I've seen attacking the Lincoln Project, there's a lot of overlap between those guys and the people that never supported them to begin with or feel they don't want to believe they had as much of an impact as they did. You know, I think the reason a lot of people accuse the Lincoln Project of being like a grift is because they assume that what they do is easy. They're like, oh, they're just out there making funny tweets and memes. Well, you know what I say to that? Compete with them. Go form your own PAC. Go try putting together your own ad team. You're going to find out very quickly it's not easy what they do. Again, these guys pulled off 8 to 12% of Trump's electorate in 2016. They were aiming for 4, and they got at least twice as much. And you're probably saying, well, wait a minute, Trump got a higher percentage of Republican voters in 2020 than 2016. What happened? Well, when your demographic has shrunk to basically just Trump voters, of course he's going to get more of them. Because in 2016, it may have been that you had 80 people voting for Trump and 20 people, you know, writing in third parties like I did or voting for Hillary Clinton. But now, those 20 people are gone. And it's thanks to groups like the Lincoln Project. Which means, yeah, the 80 people you have left are going to give Trump a 100% approval rating, but the actual electorate has shrunk. That's how Donald Trump ends up with 74 million votes and Joe Biden with 81 million. Okay? Without the Lincoln Project, that probably doesn't happen. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But that's the reality of the situation. It just is. So, again, just to summarize my thoughts here, I'm going up on an hour now. I mean, this is almost as long as the show itself. I appreciate Jennifer Horn for speaking out against something that she felt was inappropriate. I understand that people like her and George Conway and Tom Nichols and Kurt Padala, I believe his name is, have called for the Lincoln Project to be shut down. That's an understandable opinion. Of course it is. I hope it doesn't, obviously. I will admit to you all that I'm usually pretty good at predicting what these guys are going to do, but right now I'm completely dumbfounded. I really don't know what they're going to do. All right? And part of this is because I honestly still don't know how to feel about the situation. Maybe Steve Schmidt, Reed Galen, Rick Wilson, Tara Setmayer, And all the people who are currently involved in the Lincoln Project, maybe they're a bunch of bad guys and girls. Maybe they're just people who saw the endangerment of American democracy as a way to make a quick buck. Or maybe any number of the people waving them goodbye on Twitter right now to make themselves feel better about themselves would have made the exact same screw up in the exact same situation. But it wasn't acceptable. There has to be accountability for these things. That's why Steve Schmidt's no longer on the board. That's why John Weaver is probably hiding under a rock somewhere. There is no real right way to handle this situation, okay? But I think the Lincoln Project is doing the best they can. They seem to be taking the advice of a watcher from Project Horizons that he gives to Blackjack after she commits a horrible act in the first part of the story. Just keep on moving forward. Just keep trying to make up for it. Even with the knowledge that in the minds of some people, nothing you ever do will make up for it. And I understand that. There have to be severe societal punishment for these kind of things. Lincoln Project's going through that right now. But they've got a choice. They can do the investigation. They can take it to heart. They can be an organization that let things get a little out of control, and they took responsibility for it. They owned up to it. They put it all away and cleaned it all up, and they did their best to make sure it never happened again. Or they can just ignore whatever the investigation finds, let it recur, and be the group the internet says they are now, or they can just stop altogether. I don't know what they're going to do, and my guess is they don't know either. But I hope they can come back from it, and I feel badly for them. Like I said, in politics you have bad people doing good things, good people doing bad things, bad people doing bad things. And I can tell you, it is in fact possible to be a good person doing a bad thing. It's possible to have a blind spot. It's possible to speak out of turn. It's possible to be unable to tell your friends from your enemies. It's possible to be a good person doing a bad thing, especially when you are wired to be angry. A wiring that comes easily when you go through something like Steve Schmidt went through. But at the very least, they were willing to acknowledge it. Even if this does end up being the last time we talk about the Lincoln Project in any meaningful sense, if they do go down, at the very least, they were willing to be held accountable for their actions. I mean, just think about how many people are shitty all the time without owning up to it like the Lincoln Project just did. Spoiler alert, quite a few of them are still in Washington, D.C. It may have been naive to think that the Lincoln Project was immune to this kind of stuff. But it's still heartbreaking that it happened to them. It's heartbreaking what John Weaver did, and it's heartbreaking for the Lincoln Project to be caught up in all this. You should feel that too.